In this episode, I am joined by Myriam Szabo, also known as Ngakma Yumma Mudra, dancer, producer, model, teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, and founder of the international Danza Duende Network. Ngakma Yumma Mudra describes the path of the body, what it means to practice the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta through movement, and how to contact the blissful nature of mind with dance. Ngakma Yumma Mudra reveals how she guides students to transform habitual tendencies into new expression, how to read others, and why it is so easy to become stuck in the six realms. Ngakma Yumma Mudra also discusses dance as art, how to infuse technique with goodness, and reflects on what it takes to be a true artist. So without further ado, Ngakma Yumma Mudra.
I'm very sensitive to the body in general because I think all my life this has been much more my path than too much. You know, I can think about things and I can have opinion about things or not, or I can undo my opinions. I can understand about how it goes in my mind and my intellect. But at the end of the day, the more I have been enjoying the Buddhist practices sincerely and somehow in some kind of a solitary assuming my path in the same time that I respect the Sanghas I've related to and all the wonderful masters I have been with. At the end of the day now, what I feel is that it doesn't matter what I think about things at the end, because I could think one thing and the opposite. It doesn't make it real somehow. The real thing is actually it's true when Buddha says, I'm breathing in and I know I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. At the end of the day, that's the thing. And so the relationship with the body, it just became truly existing in me because of dancing all my life, and dancing also in a non-choreographical plan. So when I dance, and actually then I met my partner 13 years ago, and he has a lot of things in common with me, not in our who we are, but more about what we do, because we're a little bit opposite in the character. But we both never have a choreographical setup, but we do have a few things like a structure, especially if you are not alone. It's even more important, because I like when I dance with somebody that there is something going on between the both of us, but we don't have to necessarily touch each other or what, but there's something that makes us some kind of dynamic in that mandala. And so we do have a structure, a spatial and time structure. But the dance is kind of being composed at the moment of dancing. So like in the case of the dance, at one point, what I found out is that it's not about looking at the other only, because as you said another day, the eyes take over, no, on the senses. It's a lot about listening actually, but it's listening to the breath. It's listening to something that is the breath also in its more subtle vibrations, but we can feel it. It's like if we have senses that we don't usually use. And actually, I think I didn't do it on purpose, that I feel they are operating with me. They're starting to operate with me, but it was not really on purpose. It just involved. And like now, if we're talking about body language and feeling the persons, it's very important I don't judge them, but that I do see my own mind, that I am also feeling them. Like you talked about a dog. Now I have a dog now. It's not, I'm used to cats, you know, cats are more telepathic. The dog is more physical. And now I see the dog talks to me with how she behaves physically. She's telling me things, no? Oh, please come, or things like that. And so there is something in this mindfulness. I'm coming back a little bit to the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta, which was not originally, because I'm completely involved in Tibetan Buddhism and we don't that much talk about the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta. And I'm coming back to it because it seems to be quite easy to work with it together with the experience, as you said, of being in, for example, walking or sitting or creating a situation through movement and breath and even speech. That is art. I mean, art, like creating a sadhana in a mandala. It's the same thing, actually, as creating a theater piece. It's exactly the same. But there's a structure in the sadhana too. So this is something that when we do it, and then after we kind of lets it sink in for some time, and then at one point we do understand that things happened that were genuine things that happened in that space. And so in that Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta, he says that you are aware of your own. But then it's very interesting when Buddha says, and you are aware of the other. He says outside, inside, but outside it's not actually outside in the idea so far, what I have been studying so far, I just started. It's not that you are aware of everything that happens around you. In that case, it's more that you are aware that that person that is there with you, or a few persons, they are sitting, like you're aware of your body, they are standing, they are walking, they are breathing, they feel like this. So you go also to their sensations. This is fantastic because I experienced that with my students. So yes, you can be sensitive to the sensations of other people, but you cannot if you're judging them and you have opinions about them. So you have to, at one point, somehow let your opinion come and go as you do in meditation when you are with people, because otherwise, how could you feel what they feel? A little bit. I don't see totally, maybe not, but a little bit. And it does start to happen that you start to have that idea they had, or they say something and you say the same thing, things like that. And also what the person is thinking. So actually, I think that from the very beginning, the sutras are already telling you that this becomes empathy, not because you're trying to be empathic or because you have a more realistic idea that you should be so nice and that people will think that you are nice, so you can show how nice you are, even if it's not, you're not really nice, but you're trying to look nice. And doesn't really work at the end, because there always something happens that undoes that appearance of nice. There's something annoying that happens, and then we can see that in art. In art, it's much easier to see these things because we dare, we dare to play with different stuff. And we see that actually we're not what we pretend to be, because it's impossible to act that way in a dance or to act that way in a speech if it is not something that came from a place of emotion that you actually did feel at one point. So you start to understand that it's not that you're rejecting that you do have things that are not nice, but more that how do you drive these horses, so this being aware of others, because that's your question, isn't it? To be aware of others. And I think, yes, I think I'm very sensitive to that. But I think also, on another hand, I am usually, my tendency is to think people are wonderful, like a child, a little bit. And so that's my tendency. So I have been, with the age, I have been realizing that I am much better at not feeling attached to the idea that I would think that they are wonderful or not wonderful. And so lately I really started to understand that it doesn't matter if people seem people that I approve what they do, I approve what they say or not. That I as a Buddhist, somehow what I'm looking forward is to breathe in and to breathe out, and also to be present to them, and then to let naturally my behavior create a dynamic from the first thought, best thought. if it's not rooted in, if my first thought, best thought is not rooted in that presence, that is not my opinions or judging or expecting something. And if that's possible, somehow I can do that. And I can do it when I dance. So why not when I'm in the dance of social life? That's a little bit the challenge, no? Because when you involve that on stage, you are able to do that on stage. But then when you go back in your usual life, maybe you just have some kind of a schizophrenic, but you find out that you can actually apply it to your daily life, and you can let go of these things, and then understand that at one point, everybody and everything that happens, it's your mandala, it's what you have to deal with, it's what you have to go through. And so this awareness and empathy and dynamic together with whatever that is, I think that is how to relate with people. So like if somebody, for example, comes with no physical presence at all, and is kind of not vibrating with my sensation of truth, actually I notice it. And at one point it will end up revealing itself that actually it was not the real thing. It will end up like that. When I was younger, I didn't notice. Yeah? But you never know, because lately, like for example, not a long time ago, I saw a very good friend of mine I know for a very long time. And it has been sometimes not very easy with that friend, because it's kind of rigid and authoritarian and a little bit sometimes shows like a little bit superior, something like that. But I always thought this friendship, anyway, it's friendship, it's okay. And then lately, I saw something, because we were doing something of dance and breath and things like that, and we were in the same space. And I saw where this comes from. It doesn't come from anything that is against me or for me. It comes from a suffering. I can see it because I'm used to dance, and I never did with that person, dance and breathe and physical things. And then suddenly for me, it's much easier to understand that at one point, maybe he shows like that because he doesn't feel okay. He doesn't feel happy and at ease. So that might happen lots of times with lots of people, that we get in conflict for the wrong reasons, because it's not the true thing that is happening.
You're using the example of dance and art. And where does the role of technique come in to your explanation of relating? What I mean to say is that in music, for example, when one performs, one has also to have that availability to the moment. You can't simply deploy previously honed techniques from a distance. You can, of course, but it's not the best way. And often, in the moment, spontaneous things can emerge, and some musical styles really lean into the spontaneity, others less so. But there's always something spontaneous happening. But at the same time, even the most spontaneous musical styles, we can think of, for example, jazz, rests on a foundation of deep technical training and also a lot of absorbing of vocabulary. Jazz musicians, typically in the typical training, will learn verbatim, note for note, many solos of the great jazz artists. And that way, they absorb the language of jazz. And so when they perform spontaneously, it's a sort of blend of prior technique, of course, because they have to use their instrument, a sort of prior vocabulary that they've absorbed, also a kind of skill of relating to other musicians that one builds over time. So in other words, there's a lot of structure that's there. And then through this quality of presence or courage or daring, as you point out, something spontaneous can happen. But in a sense, that spontaneity rests on quite a lot of structure. And that structure can choke musicians, but if it doesn't, then it can produce spontaneity. So when it comes to relating and so on, and this idea of feeling, noticing, people understanding, but also trying to keep this spontaneity and holding your judgments lightly, etc. How does structure and technique and past experience and skill, etc., come into that?
Yes. So in this case, we are really talking about practicing art or dance or all kinds of art, a little bit more towards a manifestation of an offering, less in the idea of only discovering our own, and not too much therapy. Okay. Actually, my work is less about therapy, but it does, of course, lift up therapy, of course, but it's not the objective. In this case, what you're talking about really has to do with the path of being an artist, in the sense that you are offering something to the world and you are transforming your experience of the world into something that you always are offering. And so before I answer to you about what I do, I wanted to ask you, did you see a movie that is called A Man Crying?
No.
I saw it twice lately. So if you can see it, look, because it's an old movie, it should be easy to find it. A Man Crying. It has Johnny Depp in the, he's young at that time, and he is a gypsy in that movie, a gypsy on a horse. And there's a lady, I think she's Christina Ricci, I think her name is. Anyway, the story is during the Second War. Actually, even when I talk about it, I have boobs, because there is something in that movie. Actually, the lady who made that movie, it's a lady, she was a dancer. She was a professional dancer, and she made that movie. She made the realization of this movie. The movie doesn't talk too much. There's not much even logic to the story. You understand the story because at one point you have an image of that person doing something, and you don't need anybody to explain to you. There's Kate Blanchett also in the movie. She's doing a Russian dancer. And they are all in that thing of the war starting to pop up. And of course, they are mostly Jewish and gypsies. But the Jewish girl comes from an history of classical lyrical singing. And when she was, to make it short, when she was adopted by this English couple, she learned a song in English because at the beginning she didn't want to speak English. She was a small girl, she ran away from the pogrom and she was trying to survive. And then she did end up learning that song because a man in that school was kind of relating to her in another way and made her understand that she had to, and she has a good voice. And her father was a great singer, Jewish, great singer in Russia. So she sings, but she doesn't sing that Russian Jewish song anymore. She's singing this English thing that is like, I don't know what it is, but it's a song that looks a little bit like church songs. It's very lyrical and very like this, And it's beautiful because she has a good voice. And so she has this song, and then the story goes on, and you see all these characters from different countries. They're all artists. And the whole movie is about music, because everything goes through music all the time. So actually the story is a musical emotion that you have from the beginning to the end. And at one point she ends up in the gypsy family because she fell in love with that gypsy guy. And in that gypsy family, they drink, they do this, they do that. And there's the Taraf of Hajduk, you know them from Romania? The Taraf of Hajduk, they're a very famous gypsy band. I know them because I became more famous for my gypsy dancing than anything else. Yeah. And I worked a lot with a lot of gypsies, and my father was probably from gypsy origin. And so I know them personally. So they were on the movie, and they're really, they're people that are really, they don't read music. I don't even think they read anything. I don't know, but they're very basic, and they're very good musicians. they have this culture of living the music, as you were saying. So it's not the same, they don't have the same structure than this song she sings. But in the movie, it's very touching because you're not expecting that. She starts to sing a cappella, and they start, and actually they did it really for the movie, they had to do it. They start to play slowly, going along with that song, putting a rhythm in that song that was not there, but it works. And she starts to be a little bit less white and a little bit rose, you know, pinky, happy, a little bit of blood comes up. And she smiles, which she doesn't do a lot in that movie. And then me, I was starting to cry when I saw that, because it's perfect. It's perfect. So, of course, yes, there is a lot of structure, there is a lot of, but that's what life is, isn't it? We're always learning all of these things. And music is part, because we talk and we listen, and everything is music, you know, from the point of view of my ears. Of course, of the point of view of other perceptions, maybe less, but from the point of view of my ears, everything is music and vibration and silence and sound, creating together patterns. No? So when they start playing, they don't know that song, but they immediately fully listen and fully go along with her. And it's amazing, it works. It works very well. And so I think this is something very important, because we as human beings, I mean, this is spirituality. Yeah. As human beings, if we understand these things, it's not really that far away from us to improve our relationship with our manifestation in the material world of this body that we have to go through this life. We could go along in a different way, because we could learn. Of course, if you don't know music, well, you find the rhythm, maybe you don't, but then that's an adventure, no? It's an adventure going on, because you never did any music at all. In my case, what I do a lot with people, and when I discovered these things at the beginning, I really did it on my own, like 95%. Then there's 5% I kind of try to find in the spiritual transmissions, things that would help me to communicate with people. Not from the point of view that they should dance like me, because it's very difficult to dance like somebody who has 30 years of experience. It takes a lot of time, and it's probably not what these people wanted. But how could they at one point become more sensitive to the fact of seeing, or the fact of sitting? And they don't have to become Buddhist, because it's a human stuff to sit and to listen and to breathe and to feel your feet when you walk, things like that. And in the same time, keep on dancing. There's technique. I don't reject technique, you know. And the opposite, I think technique needs to be infused with the goodness of our condition, instead of being fused with lots of how you say, anguish, anxiety. Help me with English, please. Anxiety.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the word in English, because sometimes my English is weak. So, like people, when they train dancing, for example, usually when they train dancing, they usually have an objective out there. So they repeat a gesture with a set of mind that sometimes is not really present to that gesture, in the sense of loving. I mean, loving is like welcoming. That at that moment, for example, you are doing this gesture or this gesture, and you have to do it again because you're training. Then you have to do it again because you're trying to kind of improve. No? But you're not fully into the each time, the first time, each time, the last time, each time, the first time, each time, the last time. And so what comes together with the technique is a setup of wish and fears that are inside of the dance. And then you cannot easily take them away from you. So I can give you an example. If you look in the mirror every day for a few years, a few hours a day, it's very difficult to pass in front of a mirror and not look at yourself, even if you didn't want to. So in my case, it took me like 20 years to not look at myself anymore if I don't want to. I look at myself if I want. If I don't want, the mirror is like anything else. It's a reflection of things, you know? I don't have to. So this is something that was printed inside of me because of doing it every day. But actually everything I think, so if I think that what I look at is myself over there, it's printed. And so I don't get rid of it that easily because it's a habitual tendency. And then what I started to understand is that all habitual tendencies are printed in how we move, how we breathe. Everything we do is full of habitual tendencies. So what I started to do with the students, because working with myself was something that I did. So for myself, I did things, but then to work with students, they have different emotions. Like I feel doing this is so nice, and then the other feels doing this is not nice, you know. Is that I bring them to understand that whatever they do technically can be filled with the essential of their heart, all of it. So actually, it makes it become a kind of bliss pops up when you start to feel that each time you're doing it, it's already reminding you of something that is not in the sense that you should be able to dance like this, or you should be able to become like that, or you should be able to do it better than somebody else. It's more in the fact that you're doing it and it's a reward in itself. That thing that you're doing is the reward of what you're doing. And so actually you go much quicker at becoming good at what you do. So if it's, for example, imagine that you have to, you want to improvise with no problem at all. You're not thinking about anything. For some people it's difficult, and for some people it's easy. It's always like that. Some people don't like that, you know. They want instructions. They hate that. So usually in a group you have some like it and some don't. You always have to annoy somebody at one point, because I do all of it, you know. And so the people who doesn't like that is going to have to find a way that he can let himself move and let himself be a good friend to himself in that move. For now, I'm talking about one alone, person alone. Even if we're all together, each one is alone, because I start to go along in relationship later. First, it's alone, no? And then later, slowly, we create relationships. But the relationship with yourself, no? And on another hand, if you want to do, like, imagine 4 in front, 4 behind, and 4 on the right, 4 on the left, and then 4 behind, 4 in front, and 4 on the left, and 4 on the right, with your breath, for example, like you do. Like, for example, no? It's difficult. You know, it is very simple actually, but it's difficult, you know. So at that point, there are also ways to make it feel less difficult, because it is playful and it's useful, because you do need to walk and to go on the side and to understand that your body can go everywhere and also backwards after. You do need that in your life, you know. So the technique is really important, but you infuse your technique with all of your I would say, ardor, this ardor, and also this clarity. And also you start to develop awareness, because you start to understand that actually, even if you become aware of bad things in the same thing that you're aware of good things, it's actually good to be aware, because at one point you start to be able to trust yourself. So this is a process, and it's not something that happens like that. But if I am in a good, I would say, direction of the situation, because I have to improvise too in relation with the people. If they can do it, they cannot do it, I have to improvise. I will be able to use my tools and to create situations that will make them slowly feel at ease in that process. So there's one thing that I could explain is the first thought, best thought. So the first thought, best thought is an exercise that I actually created for myself, because I used to film myself training, and then I used to criticize myself and say, well, you're too nervous, or you don't end your gesture, you started it, you didn't end it, you're always doing it with the same hand, you're never using the other hand, you're always doing that, you never do that, things like that. So I started to create for myself a training of first thought, best thought, which was to choose something my body did in a moment that I was really in a good feeling, and to bring it back, a small piece of it, and to do it again and again and again, and to revert it, to feel that space is solid and my body is not solid. My body is more empty, and with energy, and space is solid. So my memory, like if it's this, I show this because it's easy to understand. So like if it's this, like make it this like that. So I'm reverting it because I only did this. Of course, because it's my style, I'm a little bit like this, When I was a kid, I used to do like this and like this. So if I invert it, I'm going to do something I never do. But actually, the gesture is completely full when you do it, go in and back, go and come back. But the path of your memory doesn't have to be in your head. The path of your memory is in space, because you go through that path. Space is solid. So this is like in a forest, you created the path, no? So it works, it does work. It's like the morphogenic of, Sheldrake Rupert?
Yes, morphogenic
Yes.
field, you mean?
Yes, it looks like that, because actually I did have students doing something on Tuesday, and then another student was not there, comes and does that same thing just 2 days after. And it happens a lot of times. So it's a truth. There is something true in there, that everything is actually happening in the camp. You don't have to owe it and to put everything in your brain. And then your memory works like that. Your memory comes out of not knowing, suddenly you remember. You don't have to squeeze your head too much. But you have to do it again and again and again. And so that's the first step. So you do like both or one, and you can do it like with a certain energy, or you can cut it, or you can make it more slow, all of these things, no? So you took one piece of what you're doing, and with that one piece of what you're doing, your habitual tendency, instead of rejecting it or doing something with it, you just enrich it. So you go to the Ratna, the earth, fertile production of creativity inside of the first seed, which was the first thought is a seed. First thought is before you thought. I call it in French, la pleine inconscience, because the French, they like the pleine conscience. And then they have a tendency to end up filled with themselves and not with consciousness that much. So I usually say there is something called the pleine inconscience. It's that you are fully not aware because you're not owing it. It comes out of something genuine. Of course, If it comes off of a genuine anger, it's a genuine gesture, okay? So that you have to contemplate that. Or I did martial art also. I'm a karate. I used to be a black belt karate. I heard you did martial art too. And martial art is very useful for these things, all of this. Huh? And so if you do an anger gesture, it's easy to understand that the anger gesture is genuine because you're usually genuinely angry. I can fake I'm angry now, but it's because I learned how to be a fake for the best of everybody, not for the bad. You fake to your child that you're angry, but you're not really angry, things like that. But most people are really. And then if you're really in love, it's easy to get up in the morning. And then if you're not in love, you're tired, don't want to get up, things like that. So it's genuine. But slowly you start to understand that there's also a genuine thing that comes out of you. It comes out of this core of your being that is not having any agenda. It's not jealous, it's not angry. So you're starting to understand what these guys are talking about when they talk of the blissful nature of mind. Because you have little, it's always happening a little bit, like there's little breaches of that, especially when you dance, because I think you notice when people dance, they usually get happy. Like Zorba, he's so happy, and it was a whole disaster. The whole story is a disaster. And then they end up so happy. It's incredible, no? Because they dance. People should dance, He dances he says, oh, this was such a wonderful disaster. So once you did that and you enriched this first thought, and you discover slowly it has a seed maybe of emotional things, it's okay. But anyway, when you repeat it, it's going to change. So you start to understand that you can work on yourself, actually. It's workable, as says Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. It's workable. It's incredibly workable. We think we are not, but we are extremely plastic. And then you see that at one point it can also come out of something inside of yourself that is not ego-centered. It's possible. And that one is the best because you feel so good with that one. That one is really the unlimited sensation of absolute presence, non-limited. So you have these, like in Buddhism, we have these two bodhicittas, no? You start to see these two. And as you said, you first working, and then you start to see it's true. There is a place of unlimited sensations and like being, because we're always being in that unlimited place all of the time. We are there. Whatever we do, we sleep, we wake up, we are baby, we're always operating from a place that is not essentially physical. But the body is this this anchor for the mind, no? Like in the sense of human beings. I don't know about extraterrestrial, but human beings, no? We have an anchor, and that's this body we have now. And it looks like this relative truth of your body and this absolute truth of your nature, your own nature, which is unlimited, full of love, naturally, spontaneous, not a big problem at all. It seems that they don't exist together, but when you are doing this kind of exercise, you discover that they are actually co-emerging all the time. Sometimes a little bit more in this sensation of bliss, and sometimes a little bit more in this sensation of how you get trapped, no? You get trapped into, like you do the gesture and then you get trapped because you get, oh, this is so boring, or, things like that. The third step is that actually when you repeat and do something, it starts to become expression of something. Of course, the first time you do a gesture, it has an expression, but then when you repeat it, it doesn't. But then when you repeat it a lot of time, it gains different qualities of expression. So this is the Padma quality, if you like, if we would talk in the sense of the 5 wisdom in Buddhism, the fire related with fire, let's say related with passion and related with communication, with relationship. So the beginning, there's not much of a relationship there. It's born like Vajra, like the mirror-like image on the water when it's clear and you can see something in the water. You can see the sky, for example, in the water. So this is the quality of the first thought, because usually we don't see it, you know, or first thought, we don't see it because we already went to the second thought. And then the quality of earth, which was when you take this first thought, best thought, and you work with it in the sense of richness and the sense of a lot of I don't remember the word in English. Yeah. How do you call this in English, please?
A fan.
Fan, yeah, the fan. So there's a fan of possibilities that you find out, and the habitual tendency, instead of being one habit, I'm like that, I have to be like that, without my coffee, I cannot wake up, all these things we do, and we say, me, I'm like that, and you're like that, and he's like that. Actually, and the animals have that. They are very attached to their habits. No, you start to see, you had this habit, and then it became this, and then it became that, and then it became that, and at the end you have so much that you are everybody. So you cannot just be yourself anymore. You became all of this. So it's very interesting to work with habitual tendency in the enrichment of that thing instead of rejecting that thing or blocking that for artists and tantra. So this is the second step. And the third step is that it gains an expressivity that is kind of contagious. You see, people get contagious in that. So it can be a lot of things, you know. People, when they are alone, they usually get stuck in one of the 6 realms. I can see all Buddhism in a room when things happen. Everything that isn't taught in the Buddhist schools that I have practiced, I did the whole 3 years, everything, not 3 years, but I did a lot of retreats up to more than 3 years, but I didn't do the traditional 3 years. So I can see them. I can see the people. I see she's going in hell. I have to go there because she's not able to get out of there. So I have to be that. I have to become that bodhisattva that comes in there. But that bodhisattva is not a hellish person. He's not in pain. So I have to be able to not get in that pain myself, but to open her space that she can relate with that energy and see how this energy is workable. So one example, I had a lady, she had the tendency to get blocked in a black box and she couldn't get out. There was no box, you know? So it's not that we don't say there's no box. She does create a box and she does feel that box. But she starts to understand that she can come out and get in the box. So it starts to, and she sees the other people also are manifesting different kind of worlds. And so some people are very proud. Some people are very, I'm free. Some people are very like this, you know, when you let them do their thing on their own. Then when they enrich it, they have to be working. It's a little bit work, you know? And then when they express it, it starts to be the relationship. So at one point, the relationship is important. So what we usually do is that we imitate each other. But imitating is like if I would imagine I have your beer, I would imagine I have your body, I'm like you, completely. It's like in the Tantra, you imagine your Chenrezi, or you imagine your Buddha, you imagine your Tara. The Buddhists have no problems that a man can imagine his Tara, and very sexy Tara and all that, no? And then the woman, they can imagine their Padmasambhava, you know, no problem. And you can even be both, which is really nice, no? Very nice to be both of them. So you can do that. And it makes it very different in the sense that it's an adventure. It's like the children when they go to get a treasure, no? You have this adventure of art, and that adventure of revealing the true nature of your humanity, you know, which makes it really, I don't know how to tell you. Doesn't matter if things go wrong or go well. You can always go through them because you know the treasure is something that is, it is your being that the treasure. It doesn't matter if it works, doesn't work, all of these things. Because I admire Milarepa, I admire all these people I admire. They don't care about being famous and being rich and all that stuff. So the other person, they are the ones I admire, so, you know. And why they don't care? Because they don't need to care about being rich or not being rich or being famous or not, they don't. So this is very relieving, like a relief. And so when you imitate that other person, we did it a lot. So I can talk now because I did 20 years of this. You know? So I have been witnessing it. And the people from 20 years ago still talk about it, and they still are friends because of this. When somebody is doing the movement of somebody else, so this person is doing his own movement and repeating it. And this person is taking the form and imitating it. And then the opposite. This one is doing, she imitates, no? And then they start evolving with that. I cannot explain all of it, but there's more, there's much more. And then they start to see that actually they can be very free, and in the same time, there is something building up between them, which I discovered much later is called the mirror cells in the brain. But I didn't do it on purpose, you know. I just thought, oh, if I do it with Shenrezi, why don't we do it together? You know, it was very simple, very direct. And so they start to feel the world that that other person is creating, but also the opposite. So you don't get trapped in your world. You can learn that this world you are building is somehow wonderful and somehow also relative. And so that brings us to the last step, I would say, which is karma. Karma is action, which is also prana, the breath, the fact that the energy is moving always. It makes the things move, no? Like this makes things move, or the blood, or the rivers, the ocean, the light from the sun, all of these energy, they always have a dynamic. And that's what makes us alive, no? And so this is where you get into the composition of all these things. Like you're in a place and we're going to compose. We're going to make out of that something, a music, a dance. Actually, we do actually make songs too. You know, even songs literally with the words, everything. Yeah, with the same technique, exactly the same. But you can also make drawings. You can make everything. It's just that I'm more of a dancer, but you can make all of it. And of course, the ground for all of this is the mind. Because it becomes very, even listen at me, it's maybe confusing, you know, it's like, whoa, so many stuff going on. So the ground is that you are able to relax into your own silence at some point, either because you danced a lot or because you do it before or in the middle, or the three, before, in the middle, at the end. And so when I did that with Danza Duende, I did it without assuming it's a Buddhist practice, but it was. People would, on their own, experiment generosity, patience, discipline, concentration, and the wisdom would come up, of course, because that's how we can be together. Empathy, of course. And nowadays, what I told you before when we had conversation, I want to slowly be able to relate it directly to Buddhism. Not because you belong to a club, but because I believe that all people that practice the teachings that were gathered in Buddhism, they are all independent and free. If you look at the masters of Buddhism, they are all completely different. Lama Shabkar is different from Machi Kladrön, is different from Buddha himself and Ananda himself. So you see all of these people, they're all completely different. They are not trying to reproduce a function. They are all very on their own discovery. But it is very precious, these tools. The tools are really precious. And if you can use the dance to help yourself, you know, like help yourself find that it is a passion to do that journey, that it is, as you said it yourself, and you said that your interviews were a reward in themselves. Yeah, I love that, because I really believe in that, that your dance is the reward. So what you're doing is your reward. You don't have to have more reward. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's at the point where I am now with this idea. So the structure, to end this, when you ask the question of technique and structure, the techniques are getting kind of cleansed from their habitual tendencies. Like if you look in a mirror, you have to work with your eyes and see the mirror as space itself. Otherwise, you are caught in this eye that only does like this. It's an eye of a grasp. It's a grasping eye. But I don't want to judge the eye. I just want the eye to open itself gently, you know, and discover it doesn't have to always grasp. The ears is the same. And so instead of talking about it, once we've found out this happens, we can open it. And that makes that then you can infuse your work, gesture, music, everything, with the best of your soul. Let's call it soul. Come on, no problem. You can make it filled with that, so that each time you do that, there's a joy coming up to you. Because you don't need it anyway. You need energy. So the energy of this unconditional joy is unconditional. You don't have to rent it, pay it. It's something that exists. Even people that were in the worst circumstances, they're very often the ones that have the most joyful manifestations, you know, people who live very difficult things. So it doesn't depend on how easy was your life. So when you find this, it helps a lot. And then after, it's an adventure. The path is an adventure. So the structure itself is a little bit comparable. You can compare it to the building of a sand mandala. But in this case, the mandala is built by the body of people. But it is the same idea. It has to be a little bit careful. We have to be a little bit careful. And then at the end, we have to let it fly. Yeah, so that's the process. After, each person is going to do its own. In my school, everybody is different. Everybody does its own, and it can be very, very different things.
Are the people who come to study with you primarily seeking a means of enhancing their artistry as performers, for example, or creators in some way? Or are they looking to this process as a means for personal exploration or spiritual exploration, that sort of thing? Well,
there have been lots of different phases, and I have been in different places. I didn't always live in the same country. I didn't always talk the same language. Yeah. So what I can tell you is, like always happening, is that I attract women and not that many men. Man cannot take me. In the sense of, not in the sense of personal, because personally I go along very well with man, but in the sense of how I work, very few men survive that and they all disappear. So far.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. But actually, since my partner started to work with me and that he has another way of doing things, there's much more man. But he did create a man camp, and the men were happy to be only with men. They felt more comfortable without women around. You understand? So I don't know. I don't have any theory why. I don't think it's logical. I think man and woman could do this, but maybe it has to do with me, you know. I don't know. I don't know. But the processes I usually do so far attracted more women. But, you know, nowadays you go in lots of places, there's more women than men anyway. Maybe men are kind of going through some kind of an obstacle. I don't know. It's possible. Maybe it will change. But since my partner came, there's more men. But we never reached half. Never. No. So they came to me for lots of things, but they were a little bit like waves, you know, because at the beginning I was a dancer. I didn't really want to teach, but at one point I found out that if I could teach, I could be free. And when I was a performer, it was such a pain in the ass, excuse me the word, but to do this and do that. And then if you're not rich and famous, it's complicated, you know, because you have to do everything yourself. And then when you dance, you come to a place, they forget that maybe you're going to be barefoot, that maybe it's not so nice to have all these things on the floor. So I have to wash the floor and, you know, and I start to get too much tense. And I'm also a very good producer, but I was too tense with producing. So at the end, I said, only dance, because when I dance, I'm not tense. When I produce, I get crazy. Yeah. And then at one point when I understood that I was discovering something very important because I was changing, I was becoming less neurotic, I was understanding myself. It started with the dance on suffering. I started to understand how I suffer from how my dance of suffering was. But then I started to understand that everybody wanted me to do the dance of suffering. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that as a business. Come on, everybody wants it. Why do you want that? You know, and I started to understand lots of things about this world, how people love things that you do, and that maybe you shouldn't take that thing as a way of earning money, or not too much, you know, because then you get trapped in there, you know. And so I looked after ways to share. And then when I shared, I found out that people had different reactions. They have different ways of suffering and different ways of freeing themselves and different ways of relating with community. So I had to become a little bit more understanding how people, you know, feel things, how they react. So I studied a little bit more of all this contemplative psychology a little bit to help me. And then also the deeper trainings of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, they helped me a lot because they cut through directly to the perceptions. So that was very useful, you know. Like you have things like for example, you go, I learned it with Lee Whirling in the Naropa University of the United States. And it's part of the Maitreya space awareness training that was very much in the theater trainings that Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche created. So this is very simple. You take 20 minutes to go from here, for example, to here with your eyes. But your movement, so somebody has to guide, your movement from the neck, so actually your whole head stays like this, and your movement goes at the rhythm of 20 minutes. So you have to cut it in pieces so that you take like 20 is 10, 10, 10, like 10 until here, 10 until here, then 10 until here, and then you have to end up at 20. Fantastic. You have another eye after. You don't have to explain stuff. People get it. So these things are very useful if we respect them. We have to respect these things because they are very pure. It's a very pure stuff. It's not something that should be think it's easy. It's easy to remember, but it's not that easy to really understand how precious it is for somebody to have this opportunity to see the whole range in 20 minutes, because there is a before and an after of that experience, And so I started to gather a little bit these things. And then the whirling, but the whirling I always whirled since I'm a child. I used to go down the stairs whirling when I was a child. So for me, whirling is the thing I always did. I didn't learn how to whirl. I'm a very good whirler since I was a young child. And in classical, when I was in classical ballet, I was good at whirling too. I was, I would whirl, and then people would sit and wait that I finished. We used to have classes with pianists, not with tapes. The pianist goes with you and then it's part of in the Russian dance, the Russian ballet training, the pianist goes with you and you have to go until you cannot anymore. You should not stop. And so some people, it's like karate, no? Everybody does, and one cannot anymore. Then at the end, there's only one, Yeah, so it's the same. And the whirling is very useful because when you whirl, you're walking. So this I didn't know because I did spontaneously. For me, whirling was so easy. I had to try to understand why they think it's not easy. It is easy. Children do it, dogs do it, everybody does it. It's easy. But I had to find out. But when you walk, you think you're going frontwards, but then you're going in a circle, and then you're going on yourself. And when you end up on yourself, you're going backwards and frontwards. So you're not going backwards, you're not going frontwards. You're going like this. You're going vertical. Because the vortex makes you, it goes, earth and sky becomes like a double, no? You understand? And so this movement, when you go, like imagine you're going leftwards, you have to also go rightwards if you want your body not to get injured. Because if you whirl a lot and you don't have the equal strength on both, you will at one point put a lot of weight on, you will start to lie upon the way you're going, So actually, if you whirl a lot, it is very important that psychologically, you're whirling the opposite way. But it's the same with when you go on the right with your body. You should actually have some resistance on the left. And if you go in front, you should feel that you are called from behind. So all of this thing of the duality. Yeah. And so, that's it. It's like laying down, sitting down, standing up, walking, whirling, and back to sit and back to lay. They would come up to me, I remember your question, they would come up to me at the beginning, when I started really not to do only technical, nice gypsy dance or belly dance or Russian dance or Ukrainian dance or things like that. When I would start to get into the mind training of dance, people came to me first because they liked my energy, because I was young and crazy and completely out of my mind, and they loved that. Wild and free. I used to call it wild and free forever because I was like that, I was really like completely in trance for many years. And I got sick after, so I had to, too much fire. I really got sick, yeah. And then they would come to me because very often, a lot of times it was professional artists that needed to, like classical musicians, even dancers. I had a lady, she was dancing. I said, why do you come to me? You dance better than I do. She said, because you inspire me. But actually she was cold. She danced like a robot, you know. And then I had also architect a lot, musicians a lot, and also people that liked to be together with women, because I didn't make it for women, but I ended up with lots of women, you know. Okay, so that was it. And then it started to also have, at one point in Belgium, I had a lot of people that burn out. And only later I understood they were all taking these pills, you know, these pills for depression and for what, and lots of people are taking that. Lots of people. And I started to understand that things were really not going well for people, you know. Yeah. And these women, so many women, they were doing abortion every year. I mean, they always got depressed. Why do you do that? Come on, what are you doing? You know how that, you know how it works. Come on, you don't have to, you know. So it was also becoming a little bit like that, but I tried to not become too much of a psychologist because I don't like it. And then slowly, as my partner took over the school, as I was sick and all that, he really worked with them on the breath and I would say the weight. And so all these people that used to work with me started working with him. So that's how it worked, you know. And in that case, it attracted also people in poetry, a lot of people in poetry too, that, you know, they say poetry and they step with their feet, things like that. So I don't have a specific kind of public, but I do have more women usually.
Very interesting indeed. Gosh, you know, I hoped to ask you today, or planned to ask you today, about your life.
Yes.
Because you've had quite a remarkable life.
How do you know?
Yeah, well, I've done a little bit of digging, but we've gone in this certainly other direction, and it's been really wonderful indeed. I propose a sequel in that case. Let's meet again and talk about your life from your upbringing, beginning dancing at the age of 3, with very strict training, all the way through your various phases of your life, which we can discuss next time. That would be really wonderful. Are you up for that?
Of course I am. I like your work and I like you, so of course, yes. It's very nice for me because I'm really interested in your questions, but also how you challenge me in the sense of really understand. I feel that you can understand, and sometimes it's difficult for me to express myself with words, you know. So you're like kind of training me.
Well, thank you very much for this conversation. I look forward to the sequel. Ngakma Yumma Mudra, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another Guru Viking podcast. For more interviews like these, as well as articles, videos, and guided meditations, visit www.guruviking.com.